How should economic performance be really measured? Well, especially with the fast-paced changing global trade uncertainties, crude oil price volatility, fears of inflation, high interest rates, and proxy wars. Well, Nigeria government says it remains positive on the growth and development outlook for the rest of the year. And this is aligned with growth projection of the International Monetary Fund, that's the IMF. Well, the question is no longer how much Nigeria is growing, but how impactful this growth is. So tonight, Babajide Ogunsowo, who is the founder of Leadership by Data and Channels Television's chief data analyst, is here to share the latest facts and figures on Nigeria's financial and economic situation. Thank you very much, Babajide, for joining us on the News at 10.
Thank you, Anne.
Global trade uncertainties are far from over if we look at this. Now, the Nigeria economy is already growing, though below potential. How exposed is the Nigerian government earnings to crude oil in the first half of 2025?
Crude oil tariffs, there's some good news and there's some bad news on that. The good news is that Nigeria's #1 export crude oil on this tariff war is exempt from all of these tariffs. So the good news is our #1 export wouldn't feel the pressure of the tariffs from the United States. However, the bad news lies in that 9-letter word, contagion. And that is because Nigeria still imports a lot of manufacturing products and a lot of other goods from other countries. Now, these countries, we're all in that global economy, and these countries are highly tied to the United States. So the summary is, even though the good news shows that we are not exposed to the tariffs because of crude oil, we understand that other countries that we trade with, other countries that we import products from and goods, these countries rely largely on their relationship with the United States. So the summary is, we might be exposed to non-crude oil imports to the tune of between 3 to 10% in the future. So the future again remains highly volatile based on our non-oil crude imports. And again, like I said, a lot of these non-oil crude imports, some come from the United States, but a lot more comes from Asia and Europe. So interesting days ahead. But speaking of the 9-letter word, apart from contagion, another interesting 9-letter word is diversify. And we remember in the last 2 decades, especially in this decade we are from 2015, one of the things that we felt was going to get us out of poverty and into prosperity was if the Nigerian government diversified from oil and moved into other non-oil revenue. So then the thinking, the assumption was that diversifying the economy would lead to prosperity. The question we need to ask ourselves is the economy diversified now, and has the prosperity come? And if we take a look at the facts, the evidence shows that there are a lot of things to worry about, because looking at the data, diversifying government revenues has not led to prosperity. And the evidence is clear. About this time in the first half of 2015, revenue to the Federation accounts 3.5 trillion naira, and 58% of that revenue was from oil. Now, a decade ago, the questions and the concerns were that we need to diversify the amount of money and diversify the economy so that oil revenue contributes less and non-oil contributes more. Have we achieved that? And the good news is, yes, we've been able to achieve diversifying revenue to the Federation account. And so look at, compared to where we were in the first half of 2015, oil revenue contributing 58%, accounting for 58% of Federation revenue. 2022, that was down to 38%. First half of 2022, first half of 2023, down to 31%. First half of last year, down to 29%. So clearly, oil is contributing less to the Federation account, but the question is, has prosperity come? Has poverty left? And so the evidence we really have seen now is that we've tried the oil revenue model. We did not get out of poverty. We are now in the non-oil revenue model. Poverty is still with us. So clearly, we've seen that the bridge to cross from poverty to prosperity, that bridge is really about productivity. And by only a productive economy based on all the evidence that we've seen and these trends, is how we'll really get out of the woods.
In about 60 days, I mean, discussions around the 2026 budget will be the focus. The question now will be that, is government revenue growing, and what has been the performance if you look at the budget in the first half of this year?
So looking at the first half of this year, what we've seen in simple terms is the government has prioritized the schedule. But what we need in the second half is for the government to schedule its priorities. A bit different. And we now need to schedule our priorities more than just prioritizing our schedule. And what do I mean? By scheduling our priorities, it is clearer now that two things have to happen in the second half of the year. We need to grow revenue, and we need to lower expenditure in terms of we need to cut costs. So growing revenue and cutting costs. And why is this important? Even though we are still waiting for the official financial results for the government about first half of this year, but the trend shows that, and there are things that will really keep us worried about. Let's take a look at the chart of the week, because that allows us to understand our revenue snapshot and why a lot of those that are even within the government doing contracts, why they haven't been paid. Look at what has happened. Look at the trends. First half of 2022, revenue to the federal government, 2.1 trillion naira. 84% of that went into servicing debt. First half of 2023, yes, revenue grew, but debt service even grew faster. And so, first half of 2023, 89% of the federal government's revenue went into servicing debt. And the first half of last year, yes, revenue has grown again to 3.7 trillion naira in the first half of last year, but debt even grew significantly more, making debt service to revenue 167%. Is there hope? Based on the words of the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Tajuddin Abbas, he says the second half of the year is brighter, and his position is, we will not waver, we will not falter. Every bill we craft, every program we design is built to serve you, enhancing your quality of life and driving the productivity that makes our nation thrive. So the question now is, our reputation has to be built, but we cannot build a reputation on the things that we say we will do. Our reputation can only be built on the things we do. And so yes, strong words coming from the Speaker of the House of Representatives, but it has to be backed now, not just by a bill, but by action. Again, we need to grow revenue, but we need to also significantly cut our costs. Thank you very much.
Babajide Ogunsewo, founder of Leadership by Data and Channels Television's chief data analyst. Thank you for your words on the news at 10 tonight.
We'll do this again next week.
We will.